this morning.
Start. Here's a yellow gavel. That's good. Good morning and welcome to everyone. I'm here for this is our May 2025 kind of sort of basically budget, the county manager's budget review. And we have we've seen the basic slides, which I did go through the over 100 yesterday, looked at them. So we have a lot of business to review, and we need to probably get right to it. And I'm happy to call on Chantel Robinson, our county manager, to kind of get us started.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and staff and guests. We do have a packed agenda today. We are going to discuss our fiscal year 25 budget projections. We'll also dive deep into our recommended budget. Our budget director, Kyle Wolf, will lead that discussion. We'll have some segments about our debt. Forsyth Tech Community College is also here to present Dr. Spriggs and her team. There will be an opportunity for Sheriff Kimbrough to present, and then we also will discuss the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools recommended budget request, which is all in front of you at your seats. And then we'll talk a little bit about our capital improvement plan request, any other discussion items you all would like to discuss, and then we'll discuss next steps in preparation for budget workshops next week. What I will say is we will take breaks as needed. Vice Chair Wisenhunt will keep us on track with that. It is a lengthy agenda. If we need to break for lunch and come back, we will do that. If we are unable to finish all of the material, we may or we may not. I'm sorry, Commissioner Wilson, we may or may not, but we want to make sure that we provide you with the details that you need to make the best decisions. So with that, we're going to kick it off with Terry Goodman, our Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, everyone. I want to take a quick look at where we are year-to-date, current fiscal year up through the end of April. These are not final numbers for April, but they're pretty close to April, and we thought they would give a more accurate view of where we currently are. So what I've got laid out here is on our revenue side, where we are at the end of April this year compared to where we were at the end of April last year. And you'll see we've got good increase in property tax revenue, as had been planned and budgeted. Still continued concerns about where we are with sales tax. We had been trending slightly ahead of where we were last year. Last 2 months have been declines in revenue year over year. And so now we're about $500,000 behind where we were at this point last year. That's obviously concerning because we had budgeted for a level of increase. Other revenues intergovernmental are about flat. Charges for services are about flat. Investment income is above budget, but it is down from last year as rates have started to slide a little bit. And so overall, we're projecting, at year to date, we are at about $4 million higher than where we were at this point last year. And again, most of that coming from the property tax line. On the expenditure side, same thing. We're going to look at different spending categories, where we are this year to date as of the end of April and where we were at this point last year. Personal services continues to be a heavy hit on the budget. We're currently spending 84% of what we had budgeted in that category. At this time last year, we were at 78%. The other expenditure categories you see, we are holding the line a little bit better. Remember, we put in some budget restrictions on departments trying to contain the overall spending side of the budget. That seems to be having some benefit. Debt service is right on track where we would expect it since it's all fixed rate. Payments to agencies, which is where we have the largest part of our payments there, are to the schools and for SunTech. Again, they go out pretty much as budgeted, so they're right on target. This is our best shot that we can give at this point, with 2 months left to go in the year, of where we think we'll end the year. And I'll put a big caveat on that, because we have 2 months left to go in the year, but our sales tax revenue will receive out through the end of September. Because the economic activity that generates in June, that generates the sales in June, is not received by the county until September, those receipts go back into this fiscal year. So we still have 5 months worth of sales tax to go, and that's what makes projecting our year end a little bit challenging, because we don't get good sales data on a local level for several months past our year end. But what I've done there is, since we're really flat or slightly behind where we were at this time last year, I have forecast just to receive by the end of the year about what we did last year. It's the best estimate I can give right now. Not seeing a lot of reason why we'd expect it to be higher, could be lower, but a safe estimate was right there to track with where we were last year, since that's where we've done through April. Same thing with a lot of the other expenditure categories, just looking at where we are year to date, percentage of budget, and where we were last year to try and get an estimate of where we might end the year. So looking at a slight increase in revenues overall year to year by the end of June.
Can I ask you a quick question? On the other category, generally speaking, what's in it? Because from a projecting standpoint, you basically were under back in April of last year. You actually, if these come in regularly and anticipate sort of the month by month, you basically, it looks like you've underestimated the 630, since we're $1 million ahead in April this year, and you're projecting $1 million behind on June 30th, and that's a pretty big swing, even though it's not a lot of money.
The other revenues, I think, are those that are less frequent, reimbursements that come in one time a year. Maybe we might forecast that we're going to get them or not get them, or we got them and they were significantly lower. There's really no continual receipt of those throughout the year. There are other reimbursements that we may get. There may be some governmental reimbursements, some state reimbursements we get that fall in that line.
If it's that uncertain, why wouldn't you be at least as much as the previous year?
Evidently, where it's tracking this year to last,
The way it's tracking this year is ahead of where it was last year.
I'd have to look at the detail of what was in there. We may have had a Medicaid reimbursement that we're not going to get this year that may be fairly sizable. Something that would have tipped it one direction or the other.
Okay.
On the expenditure side, forecasting out through the end of June, personal services, is perhaps one of the easier ones to do because we know what our biweekly payrolls are. We can take those out over the remaining 2 months and get a fairly good estimate of where we'll end the year. You can see continuing to try and see some containment of our spending in these middle categories by the time we get to the end of the year compared to where we were last year. Debt service and payment to other agencies tracking pretty much on budget. That does, however, mean that we project to end the year with expenditures significantly higher than they were at the end of last year. What that means in terms of an ending fund balance projection, this is where we are year to date with our operating revenues. We currently had a deficit of 4.4 million. Last year we had a surplus of 7.4 million. We had some transfers that will come in. This was largely from the revenue loss from the pandemic response fund last year. We haven't brought that in yet this year, but still year to year we had a surplus last year, running a deficit this year. As we move out through the end of the year, there are some significant transfers that we have left to bring into the general fund. There was a $10 million transfer from the pandemic response fund that you all approved, moving some projects, kind of a revenue loss strategy that moved both the revenue and expenditures over to the general fund. Not all of those expenditures will pay out before the end of the year, but the revenue will be brought in before the end of the year. Transfer out to the schools for capital outlay, small amount for a housing GPO, and then a small amount that went to behavioral health pandemic response. Forecast right now is to end the year in a deficit position of 6.4 million. Again, that is just an estimate. You know, a couple months ago, we were looking at an $18 million deficit. We've done a lot of work. We've tried to do a lot of constraining of the budget. There are some revenues out there that could come in that I have not included in here, and if they do, that'll help minimize that. But it's hard for me to see where we'll forecast to be much beyond a small deficit position. Right? I mean, in other words, I don't see much of a surplus if we can get there. So what does that mean in terms of what it looks like with the ratios that we've been talking a lot about, the bond rating ratios? This is where we ended last year with the Moody's ratio. If we do in fact decline, take fund balance down by another 6.4 million, our ratios will drop even further, as you would expect with a decline in fund balance. We take a look at the budget that's been recommended and is in front of you and kind of add that to the mix. How do we look at the end of next fiscal year if we perform exactly to the budget as it's been recommended? Remember, we did recommend appropriating 9.7 million from fund balance. It was largely for the debt leveling reserves. That is a planned draw on fund balance, but it does reduce fund balance. And so without operating surpluses coming in to make up that difference, we do drop fund balance. And when we drop fund balance and our revenues go up, these fund balance percentages are fund balance as a percentage of revenues. If your numerator's dropping and your denominator's going up, your percentages are going to go down even more. So this you might look at, you know, even if we performed a budget, we're still not making headway on rebuilding where we need to be in a fund balance. Take a little bit more optimistic look at fiscal 26 and say, you know, we're not going to spend out 100% of that budget. We never do. So let's say we actually underspend by the 9.7 million we're appropriating so that we can at least break even. Again, because our revenues are going up, our ratios still drop. Because unless we're generating surpluses, we cannot rebuild these ratios. And right now, we're in a challenging position to try and build those surpluses with all the other pressures and that are on the budget. Any questions on this before I jump to look at a little bit of
I do want to just clarify, you know, when we're talking about a deficit, we are not overspending this year's budget. So this year's budget was budgeted at $583 million, and we are expecting to spend, I think, $562 million. When we're talking about a deficit, it really is kind of the impact of fund balance, which is why we have really tried to freeze some of our hiring and doing some other things. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and it's worse, because I actually got that question yesterday from somebody, and I went through that exact discussion, because we knew, we budgeted some one-time money, and we did that for 2 years in a row to avoid tax increases. So from a sort of, if I'm the Mr. Taxpayer in Forsyth County, I had no tax increases the last 2 years because we used one-time dollars that would not reoccur, and we knew that we budgeted the fund balance, we budgeted. And I think it's worth repeating the comment that Terry made, that we had anticipated having $18 million spent in fund balance reduction, and it's only $6 million because of cost-saving measures and things that were instituted 3 or 4 months ago that are coming to fruition, that are helping. And I think it's so important to realize that the debt leveling plan keeps our debt the same in terms of our taxpayer pay. I mean, what we're paying keeps the rates the same. But it does, in fact, as the debt changes every year, this process we use levels it, and essentially we're ending up, this just happens to be more planned debt on that. Yes, and I would think, we had a fairly lengthy presentation from our bond counsel, our bond manager. And basically I would think that understanding that debt side also provides the explanation for the lower fund balance piece, and that's one of those variables that they consider in their whole issue, because this doesn't represent inappropriate budgeting, doesn't represent not adding more to pay off whatever. It is a plan that they understand. I mean, they understand exactly what that is. So just like they applied, we didn't meet all the criteria this year, but they also looked at what we were doing, looked at the adjustments that were made, and there's a little more. I mean, it's not like there's these numbers, the 35% Moody's is not an absolute, it's in a context, and there is a context here that's important. And I think and I really appreciate it, because quite frankly, when I looked at these yesterday, I did not understand those 2 slides. But I said, why, what's the same thing, same title, one's 0, one's 9 million. Now, I see what you did, that if we were fortunate enough to accumulate another 9 million in fund balance, which is easy to do. I mean, that could easily happen. Just look at the previous year's growth in fund balance back 4 years ago and 3 years ago, and you see that, yes, that's possible, and could easily happen. Then that actually that explains it, and I feel a lot better about that. I was a little confused.
Yeah, I think my next slide will touch on some of the trends that we're seeing, but I do appreciate you making that point. When I use the word deficit, it flashed in my mind. There's a difference between, when I speak of deficit, it's really revenues over expenditures, actual. Overspending is you're spending more than you ever budgeted. We're not doing that. We actually had budgeted for a $33 million deficit. When you appropriate fund balance, you are budgeting for a deficit, because you are saying my revenues are going to be short of my expenditures by $33 million. Therefore, I'm taking some fund balance to make up the difference. So where we had 33, we're looking like maybe we'll come at 6.4. Now, historically, even though we budgeted to use it, we haven't. And that's where we can take a look at this graph. What I tended to do here is really pull together what we can call our recurring revenues. So the revenues that likely happen every year, and expenditures that likely happen every year. So trying to back out those one-time funding sources, one-time transfers, one-time expenditures. When we transfer money out to the under the PAYGO, back those out. And how have we looked? The green line is our recurring revenues by that definition. And I went back to 2014. You see kind of where the overall level of the budget was up through 2019, kind of in that $400 million range. And revenues were tracking close to expenditures, so we were pretty much breaking even on an operating or recurring basis. Even as the budget grew, we continued to have revenues track ahead. Here we get into some of the sales tax and interest boom that we've experienced over the last few years. But here, the last several years, you see the narrowing coming down to the point where we get to 25, and our forecasts show that our fixed recurring costs are going up. Our sales tax interest primarily are leveling off and even coming down, so we have flipped. And this is the challenge that we face now, that on a recurring revenue basis, we're not covering our recurring costs.
Pardon me, may I ask, will this be a question for a later part of the presentation? If so, never mind. But, do you have a summary of the reasons why the recurring expenditures continue on that upward trend line? The major reasons.
I mean, when you look at what our, I say it all the time, our budget is people, schools, and debt, and so people is a recurring expense. That's one reason it's going up is the commitment that the board has made to really make this a great place to work, by the merit increases and the health insurance increases that we've had, and the retirement increases that we've had on the personal services side. That's a recurring cost. The commitment that the board has made to fund the school system and for Psych Tech, those costs are going up. That's a significant part of that increase. And then the debt is one of those that I don't think it's going up as sharply, but it is going up. I mean, a part of it, and that part is programmed, I would say. But,
I tried to factor in the debt leveling that we were bringing in here, because it was covering a good bit of what we might call recurring from the debt service side. But I think I would agree with those assessments. Really, it's just personal services and really the payments that we make to the schools.
And are we adding a lot of employees? I think the answer is no. We are not.
No.
So basically, what's happening is we're paying our people a more competitive salary.
we're doing that. And then on the actual side, we are filling more positions than we have in the past. I mean, our vacancy rate is much lower than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
In part because we're paying a more competitive salary.
Exactly right.
So, we're not adding positions, we are filling positions that have been vacant but needed, because we are paying a more competitive.
I mean, I'm not gonna say we have added positions over the years, but.
Sure, but it's not.
But it's not like that's the increase, no, it's really more.
I wanted to check my understanding, because
Yes,
that trend line will be a subject of questions for folks who
Sure.
see it and understand its significance. Thank you.
And I just wondered a little, actually going back to check it, I said expenditure. I think your green, the straight green line at the very end of that is, I think it's probably a little misleading. I don't think it's gonna be between 24 and 20. I was going back to look at your estimates, I couldn't quite find it, but I think, it was up a little bit. It will go up. I assume you're looking at calendar year 25, and you may be looking fiscal years, FY 25.
I looked at fiscal years tied pretty closely to that
So
initial
we-
slide.
You already have that estimate, and you've got, well, the difference is 4 million. Those are your estimates for, let me see, I put one more chart that goes, yeah, no. Let me get your year in.
And there are some adjustments I've made to the revenues, like we get lottery that's not in those operating revenues that I showed earlier, but I would consider that a recurring revenue because we do get it every year. And then I made some adjustments for the for the debt leveling.
Yeah, it's almost flat, it's within a million. Yeah, it's close, it's just, I think it'll go, if you continue that out to 26, the green line's gonna start moving back up a little bit.
With the recommended budget, yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And that really kind of supports why
Yeah.
the recommended budget went in the direction that it did.
Got it.
Because you're right, even if we do a little bit better here, we need to keep that trajectory in order for it not to flip by the time we get to the end of 26. Shifting gears a little bit, based on what we've been seeing and what we're looking at, we're trying to formulate some provisions for amending our current fund balance policy. Our current policy really speaks more to, once the year is concluded, this is what we can do. And what we've been doing largely is once we finish and settle everything out, We set aside 14% into an unassigned balance, and anything else we can shift over and use for pay-go expenditures, one-time expenditures. Mostly they were for capital needs. And what I'm proposing that we consider is a policy that is more prospective, that actually would be considered at this time of year when you're crafting a budget. These decisions that we're making within the budget, where will that end us? Where will we end up in a fund balance position based on the decisions we're making today? And really the guiding principles on some of that will be, to limit the use of fund balance to those non-recurring and one-time expenditures, so that you're not building a recurring cost into something that you don't have a recurring funding source. And then doing the projections like we've done this year to say that if we're going to appropriate fund balance, because we know we have draws on our debt leveling reserves or for any other purpose, that we have surpluses also in the budget such that we end the year trying to get towards this 30 to 35% target on the Moody's analysis, and then having an unassigned fund balance move up closer to 20%. To build back again for us the cushion that we need. Should we fall below for any reason, which sometimes can happen, the policy would also speak to a desire to institute an immediate restoration plan or a plan in order to restore those levels within a reasonable amount of time, and that would be for you to determine. But just wanted to put these here in front of you as we continue to have discussions and look to try and formulate a policy, since we know we're no longer going to follow the existing policy in terms of pay-go, looking at what we might consider about putting in its place. And again, I think something that is more prospective, something that guides decisions that are made today, rather than making decisions somewhat in a vacuum without giving consideration to how we will look when we end the year based on that budget. Anything else you want to know? All
Any
right.
questions about that until we shift to our recommended budget? No?
Before I jump into these slides, I do want to point out there is a folder at your spots there that has some additional information. One is a write-up of an enhancement request that was left out of the preliminary budget document. The request was in there, but it's for strategies for recruitment and retention, just some additional things, including additional 5%, additional 401k, some wellness days, but then also the holiday proration, which is included in the manager's recommended budget. So there's just a write-up there. We also noticed.
Wait, I want to see what we're doing. In this yellow folder, under the very first sheet, non-departmental, those are included?
Not the whole thing. No, the whole thing is not in it. What's included in the recommended budget is the 179,062.
We provided you all write-ups of every enhancement request, and that sheet was accidentally not placed in your binder. So it is just to place in your binder. The only thing I've recommended from this list is the holiday pay proration.
Yep. It was $179,062. It's the very last line in that chart. We also noticed some position counts were off on our personnel position summary area, and I've highlighted the ones that we changed and added a little bit of narrative on the second page for what happened either in the current year or next year. We can go to that later if you have other questions. There's a memo on intergovernmental revenue that's a follow-up item from back in March, April. There's some turnover rate data from 24 and showing us for 25 year to date, and a vacancy rate at a point in time back in April. And then the very last piece of it is from our facility assessment study. It's very small print, so I apologize for that. But it's just a snapshot of what was included in that facility assessment. Kind of goes back to the deferred maintenance needs that we have. We can get you additional information on those if you have questions.
And those, just FYI, those were follow-up items from the April budget workshop, just so that those were information that you had requested. And so for the facility assessment that you can barely read, we have a PDF of it, but it was really just to speak to, you had asked, like, where are you getting this from? Well, that is from the 2015 facility needs assessment. It's just an example, so you can see, we didn't just make up these items. This came from that facility assessment, and I can email you the PDF document.
I really appreciate that. The intergovernmental thing has been somewhat a black box. And so I will actually look forward to sort of looking through this and understand what all that, because that's been a real mystery. Got it. Good, thanks. I appreciate it.
So diving into the manager's recommended budget for FY '26, as you saw, our recommended budget is at $589,204,405. It is an increase of almost $5.5 million over the '25 adopted budget, less than 1% increase year over year from '25 adopted to '26 recommended. And so now it will dive into what is composed of that. On the revenue side, you've got our property taxes at 59% of what our revenue is, and sales taxes is our other largest share, followed by intergovernmental, then charges for services. And so, again, the property tax rate we'll get into, and the sales taxes we'll get into a little bit more as well. You do see fund balance at $9.7 million, and again, most of that is program debt leveling fund balance. There's also some additional fund balance from some gun and gang money that we had, that the board had reserved for gun and gang violence initiatives that we are appropriating in public health for Second Winds program. And there's also some revenue from DSS that is largely like child support incentive funds and special children adoption funds that is really restricted towards those purposes. Looking line by line, you can see a very significant increase in the property tax revenue, and so that leads into, so that's getting cut off there at the bottom, but that gets into our property tax slides that we'll go through here shortly. Sales tax, again, you can see it really is very much of a flat growth, and what we're projecting there is based on where we believe we'll end up at the end of the year. Tax increase in FY '20 based on the Article 46 referendum. You'll recall that we put the Article 46 referendum on there, and we said if that passes, we'll lower the tax rate. And so you can see in '21, it did get lowered because the Article 46 referendum did pass. So we did reduce the tax rate by 1 cent in '21. FY '22 was a revaluation year, and so we lowered it to 67.78. What I would say there is the revenue neutral rate that year was 67.03. But what I'll also say about FY '22 is we had a planned tax increase in FY '22. It was the second part of the 2016 bond referendum tax increase. And so our revenue neutral rate was 67.03. And then we were going to add, I think we were supposed to add like 4 cents maybe. But because of the rebound, that got lowered. And then the board actually lowered the property tax by 1 cent even further to 67.78. So we're supposed to be at 68.78 after the increase for the debt leveling, and the board lowered it to 67.78. It stayed flat over these past several years. And to Dr. Martin's point earlier about the tax rate staying flat, what I would also say is it stayed flat really more than just the last 2 years because of the revenue neutral, the revenue loss calculation that we've budgeted the past 4 years, really. We've kept the property tax rate down the last 4 years because of that $6 million of revenue loss that we've budgeted these past 4 years. So it's really been 4 years that we've kept the property tax rate lower. And so there you can see 53.24 is the recommended tax rate for '26. This just shows a history of the tax rate and how much revenue is generated from that tax rate. And so in FY '20, at 75.35 cents, we generated $280 million. The tax rate actually, the tax revenue increased even though we reduced the property tax. That's just like, kind of like the natural growth in the tax base. It's really what that kind of shows, that you kept the tax rate flat, tax revenue still increased. You're cutting the tax rate down to 53.24, and again, with the per penny growth, it's just, that's where we anticipate being. As far as the impact of the property tax increase, and so the median home value is $269,700 for next year, and the estimated increase in the tax bill above the revenue neutral rate is $113.27, $9.44 per month. If we, I believe it was, actually no, let me go to my next slide here. What I'll say is, this kind of shows the impact of the tax increase for your consumers. So based on that, $269,700 at the recommended tax rate of 53.24, the tax bill will be $1,435, and so that's an increase of $373. Your car taxes, however, will decrease. That's, we've kept the value of the car the same.
Which it always is.
Typically, it will go down.
But not typically. The only time it doesn't go down is
Casey
when
in our
a car,
office, she
when a
said
car
hers
is
went
super
up.
old. Whose car went up?
Casey, I don't know what, I think she needs to appeal that, but.
I think it does quick go. I had a truck that got down to $500 and it stayed $500. So that's, when it gets down that low, it will stay, but it goes down every day. So that's gonna go down.
I agree. And so again, like, there is a decrease, you will pay lower taxes on your car, especially as the vehicle decreases in value. And so that's the impact there. Let's see here, so what I want to say here, this was, so that's it, yeah, so this is at the 53.24 cents. If you went to the, at the revenue neutral rate, it would be basically, maybe, it would be about $100 less, I think, is where we kind of came up
It
with.
would be 113 was on your slide
Is that
before.
what it was?
Exactly.
That's right, that's right. Yeah. Continuing on with our revenue, sales taxes, 18.8% of our general fund revenue is down from 18.9%. It's a very small decrease. It's projected to increase $1.4 million or 1.7% over our 25 adopted budget. It's a 3% increase over our current year estimate. This is a breakdown of where Article 30, of the different articles, and so, again, there's 4 articles of sales tax. There's the Article 39, which is 1 cent. Article 40 and 42 are half-cent increases, or half-cent sales taxes, and then the Article 46 is a quarter cent. And so you can see, in 24, our actuals for our Article 39 was 35.3. We adopted at 40.1. Our estimate will be at 37, and then our recommendation is 39.7. 40 and 42 are increasing, and then Article 46 we are keeping flat. We're basically budgeting what we've estimated, and that's kind of the strategy that we've used with Article 46 the last several years, because we will true it up. It allows. It's a risk mitigation thing so that the schools don't have to potentially pay back funds like they had to this year. And then if we, and again, and if we undershoot it, then we will certainly provide those funds to our school system.
Do you mind
Yes.
sharing the schedule of payment for Article 46? How often are they paid by us?
So the Article 46 it is part of we pay the schools on a 1/12 basis, so we pay them every month.
Every month.
And we basically, we bake this number and this, we bake whatever this number is, whatever we budgeted, we put it into the school system budget so that, so they get everything that we budget. And then, which is why this past year, or in '24, we gave them too much money.
Right.
And then they had to. we had
So
to
how
make that
often,
adjustment.
if we're paying them every month, how often are they supposed to pay out on their end to the teachers?
They incorporate it into their salary structure, into their supplement schedule. The very first pay period, I believe that's what they do. When the board passed Article 46 and agreed to levy that tax, there was a discussion back in FY '21 to hold out that money and then pay the 46 supplement, or the 46 revenue to the school system as it came in. It made it difficult for the school system it made it difficult for the school system to budget for those salary increases, or those supplement increases. And so we said, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and we'll make it part of your 112 allocation, and then at the end of the year, we'll true it up.
So they're receiving it monthly, and so it should be in teachers' monthly paycheck.
I know you don't know that, but I'd like an answer from the school system in terms of what that looks like.
Okay. Looking right along on the expenditure side, again, we're at 589,204,405. And you can see, education is 33% of our budget, debt service 15%, public safety 18%, health and human services 16%. And we'll go through the different service areas as well as we go through this presentation, but that's how the pie is kind of split up. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Vesey, people, schools, and debt are the drivers of our budget, and you can see over the years the increases, and so you can see our debt policy is really that we would be below 18%, and so we're meeting that. The schools has been really right around that 30%. There is an increase in 1.5% on the personal services side for FY '26. And that is, again, baked in, the reason for the increase in personal services is, our performance increases of 1% to 6%, increases in health insurance, increases in retirement. And that's really what's driving our personal services increases. So 81.7% is people, schools, and debt. 18.3% is everything else. On an expenditure category basis, what you'll see again, people, schools, and debt. And those are again. So that's really where we talk about that. And so that's how the pie is split up. And this really kind of shows the differences here. And so again, you'll have see personal services increasing 5.3% year over year. Payments to other agencies is up 2.4%. Capital is up. A part of that driver, because it looks weird, is you'll also see a decrease in other financing uses. Where we budgeted, we budget a little over $2 million for vehicle replacements. That covers emergency services, the sheriff, and just general fleet. And that has been budgeted previously in other financing uses because it was a transfer out. We are now budgeting that as actually a capital expenditure, as like vehicles and emergency vehicles, so that's why there is an increase in capital. That's kind of what that stands out. Purchase services is up $1.5 million, and we've got some pretty. When we go through the different service areas, we can talk more and more about it. There are some significant increases for in MIS for example, for our Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. There's a significant increase there. There's also some stuff in the sheriff's office that's driving that increase. Debt service is, increasing 1.1 million. The other things that would kind of stand out, this $1.8 million for prior year encumbrances kind of stands out as because we're not budgeting it in 26. And this is really something that we've talked about not doing because when we do the prior year encumbrance item in the following year, we end up appropriating fund balance. And so it's not that we're double counting the money, but we don't feel like it's a necessary thing to do. It frees up $1.8 million in the budget, so that's why we did that. And you see a significant decrease in the budget reserve. So that's what that is. You look at expenditures by kind of county operations, debt, and schools and Forsyth Tech. Again, you just see really county operations very flat. I mean, really, again, it drives just to drive the point home that the budget is increasing essentially less than 1%, and this is where the increases are. I mean, it's not really much to say there. So Lee's going to come up and talk about debt as it is programmed for FY26. Unless you had other questions before Lee jumps into the debt. Okay.
Good morning, this will be quick. Just wanted to provide a quick update on debt service and our debt leveling plans. And so we've broken out what our fiscal 26 recommended budget will be for debt by purpose. So we've got county at 19.5 million, schools at 61.5 million, and Forsyth Tech at 6.8 million. And you can see the percentage breakdown. Nothing new, we know schools and Forsyth Tech are the biggest chunks of our debt portfolio and debt service payments. And then the county comes in at right around 22%. What I wanted to do here was take a look at, when we looked at the debt leveling plan structure in January, at the workshop there, and then this just really shows the impact of the revaluation, the per penny increasing dramatically. So we were projecting out our debt leveling plans in total, all of them combined at 11.5 cents. And you can see here when the reval kicks in, it drops down to 8.15 cents combined altogether, so all the rates. And so it has an impact going out in future years, so you can see the rate has decreased all the way across the plan. And then, as we've shown before, should a referendum be considered in fiscal year 28, the idea would be as debt leveling plan rates roll off because the debt is going away, the debt service is not required anymore, the ability to repurpose about 2.3 cents of debt from the prior year would provide still north of $300 million in a bond referendum capacity. So that's the impact of the reval again on how those rates look out in future years. And then just a reminder of all the different rates. I know this is a really busy slide, but you can see the education debt leveling plan is decreasing significantly. Library is just a small sliver, but there is still a decrease. Our other big plan is the debt leveling plan tied to the 2016 referendum, and then the courthouse piece has also gone down. So just the main takeaways from the debt side is, our total combined debt leveling plan rate has gone down by 3.35 cents. As Kyle has mentioned earlier, that does anticipate about 8.15 million in fund balance being utilized and appropriated to account for that, which is again a planned use of fund balance. And the future debt leveling plan projection decreases by just under a cent down to 2.3, with the capacity still above 300 million. So nice and quick. Do you have any questions?
This is a good time to take a short break. Sure. Vice Chair Wisenhunt is directing me. Let's take about it'll be 10 before we get back. find our way back to our seats. Ready to go.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Yeah, keep trucking here. So, next that we'll talk about is Forsyth Tech, and Dr. Spriggs and Kizzy are gonna come up. There is a folder at your place that has information from the college about their requested budget. And just so you know, the recommended budget is increasing essentially $569,497 over the 25 adopted, which is a 4.7% increase. But if you'll recall, maybe a month ago, we amended the budget to account for some increases in salaries that we had held in contingency or in a reserve. So it's really only increasing less than $200,000 above the amended budget. We are placing $228,000 in a budget reserve for, again, those possible salary benefit increases in the state, which has been our strategy the past several years. There is a requested increase of $211,314 for capital outlay that they'll discuss. That's not in the recommended budget. We kept that capital outlay flat for Forsyth Tech. And just as a reminder, we did set aside 5% of the net premium from the sale of 2/3 bonds that we're going to do in June or May or June, maybe here in the next week or two. 5% of that net premium will go to the college to offset a little bit of that issue. But I'll have Dr. Spriggs and Kizzy come up to talk about their request.
Kyle.
What you said.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I feel like I haven't been before you guys in a while. I'll be back in June to provide a more comprehensive update about all the great things going on at your community college. I do want to say thank you. I'm not going to go over the details today. My voice is better. I had laryngitis for commencement last week, which is fun. It's not a good thing for the president to not be able to speak on commencement, but we were able to work through it, and it was a wonderful commencement. And what I want to share with you is, first of all, our gratitude, because we're going to talk about your very generous support of your community college's budget. But you also are always so very engaged with us throughout the year. And that is different from other places where I have served in community colleges. And so I'm very grateful that for this past year, you have not only supported us financially in ways that have truly helped us with what we saw last week, which was the largest commencement ceremony that your community college has had in 65 years, because we're celebrating our 65th anniversary. We had over 1,000 graduates walk across the stage. Commissioner McDaniel was there as one of our trustees, and I think that I'm not putting words in your mouth to say that it is one of the most humbling and magnificent opportunities to see the impact of tax dollars really helping people create brighter futures for themselves and their families. There were so many children. We have a great photo on our Facebook page if you have a chance to go and take a look at the video and the photo of a tiny baby that looks to be about 8 or 9 months old in a cap and gown being pushed in a stroller alongside their mom who's graduating. And that says it all, much better than I could ever say it. So thank you for the investment you make. It was a pleasure to work with our new county manager this year on the budget process. She has also been invested and engaged with us, coming around and visiting all of our campuses. Every time we invite you to something, you show up. I think Mr. Wilson and Dr. Martin were there constantly for about 3 weeks in a row with us, as all of you are, and we greatly appreciate that. I'm going to introduce Kizzy Lee, who's our CFO and Chief Operating Officer, and she's going to take you through the details of our budget request. But again, we just appreciate so much all that you do to support us. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Spriggs. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having the opportunity, having us here to present the budget. I'll just go over a review. As Kyle mentioned, there are folders that have details of the actual budget request, but I'll provide an overall high-level review for you today and answer any questions you may have at the end. So our major requests are in 3 categories, really. Personnel and operating costs represent our current expenses as well as our capital improvements. Overall, we're asking for $621,000. Of that, as Kyle mentioned, $228,000 is held in reserves for potential salary increases. At the time of this preparation, we only had the governor's proposal, which was 2% and $1,000 bonus for all employees for the state. And what we do is we try to typically provide the same increase in bonuses to our county funded employees as well. So we hold that amount in contingency, and that's possibly could change. Again, that was the governor's proposal. The Senate proposal came in a little lower at 1.25% increase and $1,500 bonus. So we're waiting on the House budget. Hopefully we'll get that by the end of this month, and then they'll negotiate and we'll have a final number. We'll work closely with county manager and Kyle's team on what that exact number will be and come forward again to the commissioners at that time. So personnel services, again, $228,000 is held in contingency. The other amount, about $2,700, is used for increases for professional development and conferences. Really represents an investment to remain competitive and retain high quality staff. Contracted services, we're seeking an increase of $151,000. That represents about 3% overall of last year, and that's really attributed to inflation, increase in utility rates, as well as as you know, we've opened up, we're finalizing the expansion at Transportation Technology Center, and we completed the Oak Grove expansion as well, so that's gonna add a little bit to our expenses. Excuse me. And then in addition, supplies and materials also as a result of inflation as well. Onto our capital request, I have my staff looking for at least the last 15 years, we've been held constant at about $455,000 for our capital improvement request. We've asked for a modest request of about $211,000, and that's just to help do some long overdue facility maintenance and infrastructure modernization across our campuses. Again, it's been $455,000 for at least the last 15 years. So in closing, the total increase again is $621,000, which includes a 2% increase as well as the bonuses and benefits. The overall operating and capital expenses request equals about $393,000, which represents 3% of our overall budget. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or any feedback you would have, and answer any questions about the detailed report that you have in front of you.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuing on with our education section here, as far as with the school's budget overviews, at your place, there is a copy of the school budget that was approved on Tuesday night. Their budget book anyhow.
As well as a letter from Superintendent McManus, and that is how you will see
For the FY26 budget, we are using the funding formula that we discussed earlier this year at one of the workshops or maybe the work session, I can't remember. But anyhow, this formula is based on a growth in the property tax base. And so with this being a reval year, we used the 2.51% average growth over the last several years. And so you can see our FY25, what our FY25 budget was. And so we've added the recurring funding in, which was essentially the money for laptops as well as the money for the bus radios. We just added it to the base of for our starting point. And when you apply that 2.5% increase, you get to this 168.15 number, and then again, Article 46 is lower than what we had in 25, based on just where we are currently in the current year, and you can see the per pupil funding result as it is. And so again, the total number for FY26 for the schools is $180,556,506. Again, increase of $6.9 million. Not sure how to.
I don't know if it's touchscreen. Maybe not. Try close.
Close?
Maybe it's not touchscreen.
I think I see anybody from last here.
The device is not so smart.
Maybe it's on, is it on that remote, Kyle?
There it is, gone.
Okay, thanks. All right, so this just shows funding history from 17 through 26. And so you can see the FY20 adopted. We showed the 21 restored budget, because if you remember in 21, the FY21 budget was the first year of COVID. We developed that right when COVID was starting, and we didn't know what was going to happen, and so then we actually went back very early on in the fiscal year 21 and appropriated additional dollars, and so that's what that number is. The 22 amended, the increase there was, again, we appropriated some additional sales tax revenue on top of what we had amended or appropriated in 21 based on some conservative estimates that we were doing. We felt like we were maybe being too conservative, and so we, again, restored some funds there. And so then you can see the growth all the way through to the 26 budget, $180 million.
So I do want to say I spoke with Superintendent McManus this morning. Their request matches my manager's recommendation. And so, which is what you will see in your letter from her. And so if there's any questions that the board may have, she's certainly welcome to come to the budget workshop next week, but we figured since their request matches the recommendation, there may not be as many questions.
I don't want to poke the bear, but I appreciate the letter. I know that they're working through some physical sustainability, but for me, I can't speak for the board. I'd like to see the fiscal responsibility piece in terms of that $18 million shortfall and what an outline in terms of what they're going to need from us in the future.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
So moving on into the county operations side, one of the things that we'll mention here before, we call it out here just because this really is impacting pretty much across all the different service areas, because we're going to go through a service area by service area look. But personal services, we do have, again, that 1 to 6% increase based on an average of 4.37%. We do have $200,000 reserved for reclasses, which is a significant decrease from the 25 budget of $1.89 million. Health insurance, we talked about we talked about it at the last meeting, but we talked about it over the last few months. There's an increase in our health insurance. It's an impact of an additional $4.7 million, which includes employee contribution as well as the employer contribution. And an increase for retirement, which has gone up every year for the last, I think, probably 10 years now. General employee retirement rate is increasing from 13.6 to 14.35, and the law enforcement employees are increasing from 15.1 to 16.1. And so as we go through the service area, look at things. In public safety, we have these 4 departments comprising public safety, emergency management, emergency services, the sheriff, and the Government Justice Center. And so you can see the change year over year from 25 adopted, 26 recommended, as well as the 24 actuals that kind of happened. And so the decrease in emergency management is really based on a grant that we had budgeted in 25. The decrease in emergency services, I think, is really some capital that we had in the 25 adopted that we don't have in the 26. And then an increase for the sheriff as well. As we kind of move in, if you look at salary versus operating, personal services versus operating for public safety, you can see the difference is personal services increasing $2.2 million, adopted recommended, or 2.7%, and then the operating side, 3.3% increase. As far as enhancements are concerned in public safety, we have a list of enhancements that were requested in here, and there's an asterisk that saying there's partial funding. probably should have included some revenue here for the fire ones because we are offsetting that cost with revenue from the fire tax district, so I apologize for not putting that in there. But as far as enhancements, requests for emergency services, one fire engineer and one fire captain, it wasn't all three, it was just one fire captain are included in the recommended budget, as well as this reclass from part-time to full-time for our CAD operator, systems administrator position in 911. There's some other requests that that were requested that are not included for emergency services. With the sheriff, there was a request for 9 deputy officers for courthouse security. It's partially funded, as well as some other requests there. Also, detention officer request is, I believe, partially funded. The Clemens deputy, the Clemens reclass and vehicle purchase, the rural hall, part of the mini cop programs, those are included in the manager's recommended budget as well. And then there was a request for P&G.
I do just want to say all of these, because there were a lot of enhancement requests, all of them are in your binders, the write-ups. I will say, there are others I would have recommended if we had more funds. And so my recommendation is really based on what we kind of considered what appeared to be the most critical needs or areas that we were able to identify other funding streams. So I don't want departments to I don't think that their requests were valuable, but we did just have to make some tough decisions. And you will see all of it disclosed to you in your binders if you choose to do something different.
Can we go back to the 4 real-time positions? Was that in our budget last year?
No, these are new positions.
New, okay.
These are new requests, but they have staff in the real-time intelligence center right now. It's just, they're requesting more.
Okay.
And then just clarification too on the P&G contract. In my manager's recommended budget, I am recommending allowing them to continue half of that funding, but it is offset by their salary savings. And they know kind of how that needs to work, and they'll work closely with the budget office, because that contract really should have ended or needs to end June 30th, but to provide a little bit of a transition period for them, helping with their turnover, we've kind of kept tab to try to help with that, ease that.
I apologize for having to go back on that. And so for the animal services, how many officers do we have out there now, or deputies?
Kimberly, do you know how many deputies we have?
12.
Was it 12?
12.
Oh, we have 12, okay.
Basically, 75% of the calls are in the city.
Okay,
Thanks, Patty.
thank you.
Yep.
So I think we were going to have Sheriff Kimbrell ask the sheriff some time to come up and talk a little bit more about some of his requests.
Appreciate it.
Good morning, Commissioners. I appreciate you all. I appreciate the work you all do. Madam Manager, I know that you've been given a tough task. I appreciate it. We spent countless hours on the phone, countless hours in meetings. I want to thank all of you all for what you do. I understand that money is tight and the budget is tight, and I appreciate what the manager has recommended. But some of the things that Major Lovin passed out to you were additionals that I think are necessary. I won't go over the recommendations, what she has given. I'll just start with a few. One of them was increasing the staff at the courthouse. We requested 9, we got 4. For years, we have been requesting additional staff at the courthouse. If you recall, 3 years ago, we did a study, and the study came back and said that we needed additional. We needed 9. The 9 we have been requesting, we was at the old building. I understand that money is tight, so I can live with the 4. I understand when we look at some of the things, when you talk about the Clemens deputy, Clemens is absorbing most of that cost. The county is contributing to it. I understand when you said you're gonna pick up the 2 months because the SROs are 10 months. But when I look at those numbers, that's not really doing the sheriff's office a favor. Because, and I'll tell you why, because those 10 months that we're picking up and covering those deputies, if you hadn't picked them up, we wouldn't have SROs, because nobody would work a 10-month schedule. What would I do for the other 2 months? So that's just moving money from the school budget from here to there. So when I look at that, I'm grateful that you picked it up, because we need SROs. I'm grateful for that. But in the grand scheme of things, when I look at what are we really getting, how do we move the needle? What I have concluded is, in order for me in the office of the people to be what we need to be, we've got to move from where we are. The request that I'm asking for is the same request that I'm asking every year. And if you go down in the additional request that I asked you, where I said I'm asking for 4 additional deputies, I want you to understand something. Every day when I ride around this county, I see storage buildings being built. I see apartment complexes being built. So I went to my friend Google. Since 2018, we have increased by over 20,000 more residents in this county. What that means is we're getting more calls. For the month, just for the month of March, we had 235 000. What that means is there's not a car to send. That's like if you call, and I said, I'm sorry, we're gonna get to you. That's 000. That is March. In April, we had 227 000. What that means is you dial 911 and I say to you, or the operator says, hey, I'm gonna put it in priority, we're gonna get to you. So I'm asking for an additional 4 deputies. That's all I'm asking for. And I know that seems like a lot. The cost is $700,000, a little over $700,000. The other additional that I'm asking for is 2 additional persons in the real-time intelligence center. Me and Dr. Martin was having a conversation in the back room, and I respect that, and he's right about what he said about it. But until that takes place, we've got to have the manpower to manage. Until we consolidate these 3 different Arctics between Kernersville and Winston, we've got to have the manpower to manage the one that the county has. And if you look at it, we establish ours first, right? So if somebody wants to come in with us, we welcome that. But that will be a decision that is made above my pay grade and above my authority. That will be a commissioners, mayors, and city council conversation needs to take place. So I'm asking for an additional 800,000. That's all I'm asking for. And there's a typo where it says give back. We gave back 1.2 million from last year. We gave it back. If you would have given me that 1.2 million back, I wouldn't be having this conversation, right? All I'm asking for is an additional 800,000. And I know that may seem like a lot, and I know, again, me and Dr. Martin was having a conversation in the back. I know that the sheriff's office is one of the largest budgets that you have.
Budget increase.
Budget increase.
Of all the departments.
Budget increases. But we have to remember the intricate role that the sheriff's office plays in this county. And the role that the sheriff's office plays in this county, we have to meet the demands. And that's why every year, we have been asking for additional patrol. We've been asking for additional PCN numbers. And what we have been told constantly is that you can't ask for them until you fill them. Well, we have filled them. We have no vacancies on the sworn side. With the recommendations and the pay increases that the commissioners graciously gave us, and I'm grateful for that. We don't have a hiring problem that we once had. You all solved that. Switzerland, Daniels, Lingo, all of you solved that problem when you gave us that increase. We don't have a problem at the jail anymore. You increased the pay. You did that. We're allowed to create our own BLET schools. We resolved hiring issues. We don't have those issues that other counties have. What we have now is a demand issue, a demand for services. There are an additional 20,000 people since we first began this relationship 7 years ago. And we're in this together. And that's all I'm asking for. I can live with the cuts. I can. I won't even deal with some of the things that happen. All I'm asking for is the additional 800,000. Any questions? I know you have one, Doc. You got that look.
I told you I was not gonna
I
speak
appreciate
against
that.
your increases.
I appreciate
But that doesn't
that.
mean I'm gonna speak for any more increases.
I understand. I'm just trying to, and the things that I'm asking for is not outrageous. I'm asking for safety of the community. That's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for something elite or something out of this world. I'm asking for 4 more deputies. And if you look at that, during the month of April, March, you had over 200 000. What that means is somebody's calling the sheriff's office and I don't have a car to send. I don't. And I know that conversation is being had, as Major Loveland said, a lot of calls with animal services are being answered or in the city. But what I have to remember is simple this, that the people in the city pay county taxes and I have to serve them. Now, there's another way to not do that, someone tell me. So what I'm asking for is an additional $800,000. That's what I'm asking. I appreciate any consideration that you all can give me. I appreciate what you've done. I know the hard work. I know it's a juggle, get this, take this. And I appreciate the comment that you said that you value the request, we just don't have the money. But you know, my mother used to say, you can pay now or pay more later. And all I'm asking for is that we figure out how to do that. That's all I'm asking for. That's all I came for this morning. And I appreciate you all, I do. Thank you.
You have 4 deputies assigned to the courthouse now?
So right now, we have, the exact number that we have at the courthouse is what?
There's 29 of them, I believe, right
20
now.
29 assigned to the courthouse. So over the years, 31 assigned. So with the request giving us 4 more, we requested 9, and the manager's recommendation was 4 more. So we're gonna add 4 more to the 31, which will give you 35 in the courthouse.
That's what I meant, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So for your SRO officers on the 10 months, what are you gonna do with them for 2 more months?
So there's training they have to attend.
Oh.
Training they have to attend. And so what we're gonna do is the training, as well as the training, and also we're gonna work them into the community. Because as I said, we are short deputies on the street.
So how many SROs do you have? 20-something?
39.
39 total.
Just 39? So if you multiply that times 2, that is 78.
Right.
And you have 2 months of employment of 78 people.
Mhm.
I believe you can increase your patrol some during the summer too, which would help avoid, at least for those months, your any 000. You're getting 78 additional months of workers, folks to work into your system.
I don't know how you say 78. I know you're doing the
So
math.
I'm doing months, 78
Right.
months, 78 months of employment, 78
Well, here's how I look at it. There are 12 months in a year, right? There are 12 months in a year, how I look at it. And so those 2 months that they're not working, if I put them on the street, there's 10 other months that I don't have nobody to answer those calls. So what you're saying is.
You have 78 months more this coming year
not
than you
78
do the
months.
previous year.
It's not
It's only
78
12
months.
months in a year, where I don't know about. Am I missing something?
Well, you answered this question. When they were all 12 months paid with SROs, did they do some school things during the summer? I hope so, because if I'm the school district, I'm paying you to have, these
I'm confused on
439
that.
resource officers. What are they doing for the schools in the summer now?
Say that again. Are you saying, let's get the basics. They're
All
only
right,
12
just
months in a year. 12 months in a year. Let's stay
Let me
right
try to
there.
ask this a different way.
Please do, because there's no
Think
78
back
months in a
to
year.
Last summer.
Okay.
Not this coming summer.
Okay.
Last summer, you had 39 resource officers working 12 months. During the 2 months that school is not in session.
Right.
Those 2 months, what did those 39 people do during those 2 months working? Remember, they're being paid for by the schools to work as SROs. What did they do?
Chair, if you mind if I jump in real quick?
Sure, I was gonna explain it to you, but jump in, maybe you speak a different language.
So during those 2 months they're off, they're doing their training, there are also summer school programs that are going on that they have to
There
cover.
won't be
As
summer
well as a
school
lot of them
programs.
take vacation during that time because they can't take it during the school year. And that 2 months goes very, very quickly. So yes.
I hear that. So the next summer,
This summer we're coming into.
coming up, what are those 39 people gonna do? They're not gonna be in summer programs because the school district is not hiring you to do that. And I assume then you're deciding because you're gonna just, even though the school district's not paying you, you're gonna pay for their training to go in the summer, right? I think you have to, yes, everybody has to take vacations. I realize those folks have to take more, but they're not taking, I don't know how many weeks of vacation they're taking. I mean, I can figure all this out.
When would they
The
do
point
this?
is, you have more people this coming summer working in the sheriff's office than you did last summer because there's no encumbrances with the school.
But Doc, under that thought process, Doc, that doesn't equate to the other 10 months where I don't have manpower out there. You're talking about 2 months out of the year, 2 months, where they have to do training. They have to do the training, Doc, to be SROs. We have to give them vacation, Doc. So in between the training and the vacation, 2 months go like that. In addition to that, Doc, we're utilizing them in other aspects to fill the void that was void.
If I may, Dr. Martin.
You may.
Also, what we do is provide security for the parks, recreations, the pools, because the incidents that happen out of the community is the ones that bring inside the schools. So we're providing an extra layer of security.
Right,
So
so
the
that,
schools, never mind, I'm not gonna belabor this, it's a minor issue. I was just trying to point out, you've got a few more resources at your disposal this summer than you did last summer. That's all I was gonna say.
Joe, I appreciate that. If you could do some figuring or some consideration, I will accept the 2 months that you're talking about, but the other 10 months of the year, I need deputies. I need them. So if you want to subtract what it will cost you the 2 months, that's fine. However you come up with the numbers, my request is simple. I need more manpower. That's all I'm asking. Yes, sir, Mr. Besson.
You mentioned an interesting statistic. You know, the triple zeros, the calls or serves that had to be said, we'll get to you as soon as we can. I know that you get a lot of 911 calls come in that are not true emergencies. I'd be interested in any breakdown you have further of the figures of the nature of the calls. You know, how many of them were animal service calls? How many were, you know, however you categorize them?
Yes, sir, I understand exactly what you're saying. Tell you a short story. Last Friday, Saturday, forget the exact day, we had a call, which was a non-emergency call. We were at 000. Neighbors called saying the lady package hadn't been picked up, packages on the porch, right? Typically, that's not an emergency. Our packages have not been picked up on the porch. When we finally got a deputy to go to the house, to knock on the door, look in the window, and look in there, the lady had a medical emergency. She died the next day. What I'm saying to you is that you don't know what an emergency is until you get there. That's what I'm saying. No matter how you look at this, you gotta look at the number, 000. What that means is that I have nobody to send. And I have nobody to send to an unknown situation, so therefore I have no idea what they're going into. Imagine if you call 911 in the county and I tell you I don't have nobody to send. Imagine that.
I certainly
Imagine
called
that.
911 to the city and said.
But if you lived in the county, I
understand, but, you know, as a comparison, I have certainly, you know, called to report something that was a potential emergency. Shots fired, heard, and said, we'll, you know, it's Saturday night at 11 o'clock and everybody's on the call, we'll get someone there as quickly as possible.
Strange feeling.
It does happen, and it happens no matter your level of staffing. So since this is the lead example in your request of why you want 4 more year-round deputies, for patrol, I presume.
Yes.
Okay. Then, you know, when comparing this to the request from EMS for 16 full-time advanced EMTs with equipment, you know, they're all going to be answering medical emergency calls. So how do I compare, where do we dig up the additional money? Who do we cut and where? Or how much additional tax increase do we have to make in order to do the 4 compared to the others? I'm just asking for more information
Right.
on.
But here's what I would tell you as it relates to that, and that's a great question. I don't know if you know this, but many calls that EMS go on, they stage. What that means is they don't even go in until we get there. Did you know that? So imagine you dialing 911 and there's a situation, EMS is staging. They stage before they go in. So if they call and say we need a deputy, and I say I don't have nobody to send, they staging until I get there. I don't know if you knew that.
How many of those unanswered, how many of those delayed calls are those?
All I can tell you, I can go back and look at them individually, but I know for a fact, what I can show you today is that during the month of March and April, there were over 200 each month of 000.
And
Now,
so
if you'd like for me to go back and identify what the calls were, I can. But here's what I'm trying to paint the picture is that you have no idea what the call is until you get there. The call where the lady said, the neighbor said the packages hadn't been moved off the porch and they had been sitting there, right?
I understand that.
That's not a priority
But-
call.
But we're having to evaluate competing budget requests.
I get that.
For potentially critical matters. And yes, since you have cited this, you know, statistic, it would be helpful for me in evaluating, you know, my position on comparative request priorities to have the further background.
Right.
And Sheriff, let me just say one thing.
Please, Doctor.
Your budget has got a lot of codes, a lot of items, a lot of things in it. And if this is the thing that is keeping you awake at night, triple
A lot of
zeros,
things, Doctor.
you need to move some money out of some of your budget items and put it there, because that's where you're talking about is the most important thing for you. Then you can do that, and you can make some changes within your department. You have authority for budget authority in your department, and you would not want me to go through your budget with a fine-tooth comb, asking lots of questions. So I think I would just, I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate, our relationship has gotten so much better.
It really
Sheriff.
has.
It is so much
It really
better.
has.
I love you, Sheriff, I love you. It's gotten so much better. I mean, and that is great, and I admire you, I brag on you. I think you did recruit, you said I'm gonna find these people, and you did it, and your personal relationship and leadership skills are wonderful. I think a lot of you, Sheriff.
Mutual feelings,
But
Doc.
when you get down to money, there's some issues probably need, if you think this is the most important thing ever, then you need to get within your budget and start freeing up some to hire those 4 additional, patrol officers. That is my suggestion to you at this moment.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you, Doc. I do. I appreciate all of you. And that's easier said than done, Doc. The work that I do, Doc, it's like, do I cut my right arm off or do I cut my right leg off, right?
Don't get me into your budget.
I know. I would love you to look at it, Doc. I really would. Because I think that when we talk about the sheriff's office budget, right, there are a lot of intricacies that I think we need to understand. You can't just say, well, we'll do this but not do that, Doc. All things work together for the good. They do. And we have to put things in perspective. I appreciate you all. I appreciate all of you. And I know this is a tight budget season, I do. But I just want to put the facts out there because, Commissioner Bessie, we have been asking for an increase in PCN numbers in patrol since I came into this space. If you go back and pull it, I have been asking. And I have been given the same answer. All I just want to be on is on record saying, hey, I'm asking because the decision is yours.
And Chair, I respect that.
Yes.
Which is why I need the background. If I were going to argue for a change in our budget for your office, in addition to what the $2 million additional that the county manager has recommended, I've got to have the data.
Can I get that 1.2 backed up? Can I get that backed up?
Well, just in the 1.2 is actually in your continuation budget for fiscal year 26. Just clarification,
So-
it's part of your fiscal year 26 budget. We just asked for you to freeze hiring some of your positions in this fiscal year to help with our budgetary challenges, but that didn't go away in fiscal year 26. You can, starting July, you can fill those positions.
Oh.
Yeah, I did.
So I got those positions.
We never took
I'm saying, so
them, we never took away, you keep saying like you gave back
You didn't delete?
1.2.
So am I gonna be able to add to what I got, is what I'm asking?
No, your budget is this, we did not take away for fiscal year 26. I do also just want to clarify, Sheriff knows I'm gonna, what I'm probably gonna say. When I was evaluating recommendations, which again, I would have probably recommended more if we had more funding, but I was provided a priority list in priority order from the sheriff's office, and it was the top 10, and patrol was number 7. So number 1 was courthouse, which we hit some of that. Number 2 was returning 3 detention officers and eliminating the temporary agency contract. We did that. And then we were able to do a few kind of other things, but I just wanted to say, patrol was number 7 and the Arctic was number 8. So when I was doing my evaluation, it was based on that. And I don't think I also fully understood all of the 000 stuff either, but I just wanted to clarify why it did not rise to kind of the top of my list.
So
And
please
we
let, so
probably don't
please
want to talk
let me,
about
please let me.
your overtime budget.
Say again?
You probably do not want to talk about your overtime budget here.
I have no problem with that. I don't, and I'll tell you why, right? So let me give a clarification. If you go back and look over the past years, the request for patrol has been at the top, has been at the top. So the thought behind that was, if you don't recognize when it's at the top, then I've got to do something else. Because consistently you have told me no. Consistently your answer has been, don't ask for them until you can feel whatever you got. Since I've been here, the last 7 years, every cycle I have asked for an additional PC and numbers. As it relates to overtime, I'm glad you asked that. Because here's the thing with overtime. If I don't have the manpower, I have to pay the people overtime to cover what needs to be done. And I know that's a conversation, but the overtime is not standing across the street doing nothing. Every dime that is spent in overtime is to compensate inside the jail. It's to compensate for the protests that are right here in front of this building. It's to compensate for the parks to watch this, to watch that, right? And so the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office does a plethora of things that require manpower. So if I don't have the manpower, I have to pay the existing staff overtime. So I would love for you to come back, because in the words of my Commissioner Don Martin, that he has always gotten a return on his investment. And so I don't know no other way to
Always
sit.
wanted one, that's for sure.
You got it, you got it. And those were your words, right? So the overtime budget, I have no problem discussing that. That's a simple answer. You have to put people where the need is, and if you don't have the people, you gotta pay the current staff the overtime. And I see that's where you increased it. So I think that my ask is not unreasonable.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank y'all, thank you.
Shifting gears to Health and Human Services.
So Health and Human Services, we have, our animal shelter, youth services, Health and Human Services, DSS, public health and behavioral health. And so you can see actual to adopted to recommended on the increases.
So I only had a question about animal shelter, and I think someone answered it kind of for me already with the new director coming in. Has she had an opportunity to kind of look at what's happened in the past, and then to hear that we have, is it 35 or 39 deputies with the animal shelter?
That's actually the sheriff's budget, and the animal shelter does not include the animal control
I
activities.
understand, yeah, I know that, but I just wanted to just kind of make sure that we were increasing and not staying the same for animal services.
So we're increasing, the recommendation is 3 health and wellness techs, which is essentially individuals to help like clean the kennels and those kinds of things. Kyle can speak a little bit to the animal shelter director, kind of her initial assessment, which we will invite her to the next meeting so y'all could actually lay eyes on her and formally meet her.
She has been busy, but yeah, we'll have her next Monday. So I think she has. That was kind of her first task, is really to assess the operations as of now. This recommendation was really from what she felt she needed to be able to address some of those concerns that were raised in that report around the wellness and assessments of these animals as they're coming in. I do not think she's made any recommendation on the control side of that. I mean, her purview is really over the shelter
Yes.
operation, so she has not made any sort of.
Are they, is the deputies department still close in facilities?
Yeah, so they certainly work together, and I will say, I'm talking to Ms. Bertman, I think she's created a strong relationship with the sheriff's department and are working in alignment.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
Again, so looking personal services and operating, you'd see increase in personal services of $4 million, and on the operating side, a decrease of actually $3 million. And I can say part of this decrease in operating can be found in Department of Social Services, where there was one of their programs that had been kind of a pass-through is not going to be passed through anymore, and it was the $3 million for their crisis intervention plan, low-income energy program. Sorry, thank you. Where they used to pass that money, the state used to pass that money to the county, and then we would pay for utility bills and that kind of thing, and now the state is just going to do it from their end, and so that's about a $3 million increase there. So really operating is probably pretty flat, other than that. As far as enhancements go, as the manager said, there's 3 health and wellness technicians in the animal shelter that are included in the recommended budget. There are 4 positions in the in DSS for their after-hours unit, for some social workers and a social work supervisor. And then the Forsyth Winds program, it's not the full 734,861. This is partially funded through, and probably should have some remedy there, partially funded through the gun and gang violence money that the board had set aside several years ago. So that's what the first, that's.
So I
yes.
have a question. So have we communicated with the city of Winston-Salem in terms of this partnership that we had?
Yes, so I had actually asked the city manager if they would match our funds, and he does not have it in his recommended budget. He was hoping that we would get grant dollars, and I told him we're hoping to get grant dollars, but it would be great if they could match, because this is supposed to be a partnership. Our team presented to their public safety committee on Monday as well, but at this point it is not in his recommended budget. So the Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods, our implementing partner, has been working to reduce their budget to the recommended amount, which would essentially potentially take them another 6 to 7 months. And then our hope would be that we could maybe get some grant dollars or something would come in prior to that time.
So do you know which city council person sits on that?
Yes, so the chair is Scipio. It was James Taylor, because he was on, on our peer violence steering committee.
Okay.
And that Scipio is now.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Culture and recreation is our library and our parks. So it's actually a decrease for the library and a modest increase for the parks. On salaries versus operating, again, you can see salaries are increasing, personal services is increasing, and then on the operating side, there's a decrease year over year. There were no investment requests for either of those departments. Environmental protection is our environmental assistance and protection department, and our inspections department, which is city county. And so you can see the increase year over year. And on the personal services side and operating side, again, you can see the increase year over year. And operating side, pretty much flat. There are no enhancements for environmental assistance either. CED, Community Economic Development, again, is our airport. CED and planning. Planning is a city county department, obviously, and so that's increasing slightly. Community Economic Development is decreasing. A lot of that is driven by economic development incentive payments, and then the airport is increasing. And as a reminder for the airport, what we budget for the airport is really revenues and expenditures are equal for the airport. On the salary side, so again, you can see slight increase on salaries, big decrease in operating, again, kind of going back towards the economic development incentives. And so you can see an overall change. There was one enhancement request from Community Economic Development for a compliance manager, a grants compliance manager program or position that's not included in the recommended budget. But again, as Ms. Robinson explained, there's a write-up for all of these enhancement requests in the back of your budget document in the appendix section. Administration, there's really kind of like our internal service departments. So you can see the year-over-year increases here. So basically about a $2 million increase year-over-year in administration. And when we look at salaries versus operating, again, or personal services and operating, 4% increase, personal services, 6% increase in operating on here. One of the things, so again, I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the increase in purchase services, again, so a significant part of that operating increase is really, it's our Microsoft agreement. As far as enhancement requests, none of these are recommended, partially or in full. And so what you can see is General Services had a request for, it's basically a vehicle tracking kind of system, some additional internet connection work at the Health and Human Services campus, a GIS specialist, and that for site, an executive assistant, office administrator position for in general government. You can see it's the Board of Elections, Register of Deeds, Tax, and non-departmental. And so really fairly flat budget year over year.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Was not the Board of Elections increase last year driven by election year? And I mean, I thought there was an increased staff and an increased issue because of the election and stuff last year. And so I'm kind of curious why it remains basically stable.
I know there are 2 elections this year. I think there was only 1 election last year. I mean, there's obviously the large election.
But they're much smaller.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
there's.
the staffing,
We can get Tim Suji to the budget workshop, but there was a change in the statute, and there's really a non-funded mandate that has to do with the turnaround time of when they have to do the provisional ballots. That's going to require them to add more temporary staff because of this time frame. It's probably in our book somewhere, but we could get Tim Suji to talk more about that, but there were some budgetary impacts because of that.
The other thing I'll say is because the FY26 part of the elections will be municipal elections, not the city, but the other municipalities. Those are reimbursed 100%. And so last year we had, in the 25 adopted budget, I don't think we had any revenue for the Board of Elections. In the 26 budget, we will have revenue budgeted. And so the net county dollar cost year over year.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Good.
Kyle, could you speak to the non-departmental, such a huge increase from 24?
Well, so the 24, that's the actual side, and then the adopted. One of, let me see, one of the things that we did in '24, obviously we budgeted. One of the things that shows up in our budget is there's a budget for performance increases and for the comp and class increases and for those two components, which is probably. Probably like at least $4 million or so, and that doesn't show up on the actual side because those costs are actually in the actual departments, and so while they're budgeted here, they end up getting they end up reflected in the departmental budgets, and so that's one of the reasons that there's a decrease or there's a difference between what was in the actual and what was actually budgeted. I can go back and look and see what the other drivers are. You can see from year over year, from 25 adopted to 26 recommended, it's actually it's actually very kind of flat. It's increasing, but I'll go back and I can follow up on that for you. I'm trying to remember what else would be in there. Okay, and so again, personal services and operating, you can see there's an increase here. And one of the reasons for this increase, it's again a fairly large increase. One of the other things that we've done this year versus last year is we used to also budget a salary savings number in non-departmental, a negative number, which I think last year was around $4 million. And this year we actually programmed that decrease in the departments, and so because there's no negative number for salary savings in non-departmental, that's kind of increasing there. Operating side again is decreasing $2.6 million, but we can definitely get you all the additional information on the non-departmental side.
I do want to mention, Tim Suji just messaged me that new legislation also changed municipal elections to partisan, which opens up for possibly 2 additional elections.
Is the revenue side of that on the election, sorry, the revenue side in the budget and the revenue side? I mean, that's rolled into big numbers that don't appear without a lot more. In fact, I'm not so sure that level of detail is not in the budget book.
So we have $248,000 of revenue in elections budget.
Which is all, I mean, that really is.
Yep, and this is, this is reimbursements for municipal elections.
That's good, thanks.
Thing I did notice is this number is different from the number that's on your sheet. The number on your sheet is correct. This number is not correct. I think this number did not include the holiday prorated pay that is actually recommended to be included, or that is actually included in the recommended budget. And so the number on your sheet is the correct number, which is so it's $3.3 million, not 317. So I didn't get that fixed, but that's what that is. And before we jump into capital, just other expenditure discussion items. So on the community grant side, again, funds are included for behavioral health and opioid settlement, and JCPC, and outside agencies receive some from the Home Community Care Block Grant. Our formerly
Which
called
we
special.
are still waiting on the allocation for Home and Community Care Block Grant, which is later than normal, just FYI.
Again, we don't have anything for what we formerly called special appropriations in the recommended budget. On the fire tax side, we have adjusted the fire tax district rates down to revenue neutral, increased the overlay rate above revenue neutral to pay for some additional things. And then there was a fire chiefs meeting on Tuesday that I know Kyle and Chantel went to, and I'll let Kyle, if you want to give an update there or.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we, first off, I think all the fire chiefs watched our briefing last week. They were tuned in, but we did update them on the conversation we had. All of them had seen their recommended budgets at this point. And so there was a question to them by one of the chiefs to if they supported this recommendation, if anyone was opposed, and there was no opposition. And so, you know, what it ended with was the chair of the Fire Chiefs Association is going to be writing a letter to you showing their support for the recommendation.
And they
That
do
was
know
good.
they can come next Thursday to speak if they would like. We did tell them that that date was open, based on your discussions last week.
And it's a big sea change in improvement in services across all, minimum level services across all departments have increased substantially in the first response. And that, I mean, that basically 24/7 coverage at every station is really important, and that's not been the case this year. So that's a real enhancement, and it's covered that part, that sort of equalization in minimal services, read that part, is covered through the overlay. And I think it was good for all the chiefs to kind of acknowledge that's really important, because it also puts, the money's coming to them in different ways, but it's a little different than they have operated with their sort of attachment to the tax districts. And I think that's beginning that part, which was really important. And I want to thank Commissioner Linville for serving on that committee, which was met many times and had some really good, I mean, that was a really productive committee with some good open-minded review, and I think it was a good year's worth of study. And now the really hard work, even harder work is coming with the Fire Commission. That'll be a part of that recommendation. It's not a money issue, but it'll be a beginning to work on the kind of the next transition, which was good. So I just wanted to say that I think a lot of great work was done this year with our fire chiefs.
Can I go back to what your category is, community grants there? And you start referencing, of course, the projects that are funded by their own revenue stream: behavioral health, opioid settlement, juvenile crime prevention, Council of Home and Community Care block grants. However, by not including any of what used to be called special appropriations and are now referred to as the category of community grants, that's a $1.89 million cut from last year's budget. And the only thing that particularly concerns me is that includes several programs that had, just 2 or 3 years ago were included as departmental expenditures under what was, grouped together as the so-called Department of Aging. It was not actually Department of Aging, but these had come to be regarded as recurring items that did not go through the special appropriations process. Off the top of my head, I can think of about $500,000 to $600,000 worth of that $1.89 million that fall within that category. Things like a substantial part of the Meals on Wheels program.
Yeah, what I would say is, well, you are correct. I mean, those several years ago were under the category of aging services, but all of the other special appropriations did not go through the same process as them. If they were in the budget, I think for 2 consecutive years, then they were in the budget continuously. So at one point, they had to apply every year, everybody did, then at some point, if they were in the budget 2 years, then they didn't have to apply. And so while they had a category, they were treated just like everybody else as well, where none of them had to compete for several years until then we opened the process up for everybody. So they really weren't treated differently, besides they had a different label in the budget.
Well, they had a different label in the budget because they were a different category, really, of costs.
Depends how you categorize things.
Yeah.
Can I, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just forecasting that I believe we'll need to have additional discussion on that item.
And that's what I was gonna say, is I just, we're gonna bring it up today, got lots of stuff, but this is, in the big picture of what we've been talking about, this is a very small amount of money. And I think we can have more discussion about that.
Well, we put this as a placeholder here if you wanted to have discussion today, but certainly if you want to do that in your budget workshop, you can do that as well.
Budget workshop.
I don't know if anybody can think of this might be a place to do it. Kimberly Bussey's gonna come up and discuss capital.
It's good, all right, let's try another 10 minutes, we're pretty close.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Well, we didn't do a good job explaining.
All right, we are ready, and it looks like everybody's ready to talk about capital improvements.
Good morning again, commissioners. Back to talk about our capital improvement program. As a reminder, the capital improvement program, or CIP, is a multi-year forecast of the county's capital needs. It does identify projects and revenue sources, and a reminder that it is a planning tool that's not static. There will be evaluation each year of this CIP that's evaluated according to the county's goals and financial considerations. And in fact, in the development of this year's CIP, we've already, since we met with you in our April budget workshop, done some evaluation and prioritization, and we've updated the CIP since last you saw the projects list. So now the CIP does only include projects that identify our existing funding sources and does not include any additional debt. However, we did see quite a list of deferred maintenance projects, and so we will continue working throughout this fiscal year to identify and prioritize those projects, certainly get any additional information we might need, and to continue working on that funding strategy to bring back to you in 27. You've seen this slide before, a reminder of how the CIP is structured. There's three main categories for county capital, for the schools, and for Forsyth Tech. And Deputy County Manager Kyle Haney has talked about the possibility of adding a fire tax district capital fund as well. We talked about horizon issue projects when last we spoke. This is especially important moving forward since that large list of deferred maintenance projects is now down here in the horizon issues list. These projects, you'll see them in the CIP, but they're not a part of the CIP. So the CIP is only for projects that identify funding sources. And as you will see projects and funding sources in these categories, you'll also notice that they'll be presented by project type. So these are some of the potential categories that you'll see in just a moment. This is a look at the CIP proportions as they stand right now. 69% going to schools, 25% for county capital, and 6% for Forsyth Tech. And this again includes only the funding sources that have been identified in the CIP. This is a look at the capital improvement program for 2026 to 2031. It's an updated look. You'll notice there are no projects from 28 through 31. That's because we did not identify any additional funding mechanisms for those projects yet. So the only things that are included in the CIP are 26 and 27 projects. You'll notice there's an amount of 6.17 for county, 2.3 million for Forsyth Tech, 29 million for the schools. Again, because we did update the CIP in reference to only including projects for funding sources that we have existing, we want to kind of zoom in a bit on the revenue sources. So again, the top is revenue sources, and the bottom is our uses or projects. So we're going to focus in on the revenue sources for a bit. So of the revenue sources, again, just to point out, they are planned or existing funding sources used. This column over here in the yellow identifies where the funding sources have been approved by the board. So for example, the 23 PAYGO, there's some funding sources listed here, for in particular a project with the Sheriff's Office. That project has not started yet, and there's been a scope change. That's why we want to bring it back to you and get it approved as part of the CIP. But that funding was identified in May of 2024. If we look at the 2/3 GO bonds, an amount of a total of $4 million for county, 2.3 for Forsyth Tech, then a total of $27 million that was just approved by this board on April the 10th, the bond funding source. And then another grant for parks is included in the CIP. But this is part of this $4 million for county, for schools, and for Forsyth Tech, 8.5, is our traditional funding level. We talked about that the schools, or rather the county and parks have been receiving about $1 million each for the last, since about 2017. So that's our traditional funding source, our consistent project level for maintenance that we've been receiving in the county. What I do want to point out are these two items in green. So we have our traditional maintenance funding level that's included in the CIP, but we did have a few projects that were identified as critical projects we really wanted to tackle in 2026. And so these funding sources in green are a little bit above and beyond that traditional funding level we've received. And those include the GEO 2/3 bond premium that was just passed by this board on May the 8th, and that was identified for 65% for county, 5% for Forsyth Tech, and 30% for the schools. The other item that's new that you'll see in this as a source for the CIP is a county project reserves in the 1.54 million. That is part of a larger capital project ordinance consolidation and cleanup item that you'll see that'll come to you next week. Anticipated approval date is May the 22nd. And that's where we've closed projects, identified project savings, appropriated interest earnings, done some work on our existing projects to see what can be moved to the general fund and what can be used here for these critical capital projects that we've identified for 26.
And I do just want to reiterate, the bond premium amounts, those are estimates. We really will not know the final numbers until we close, which will be, what's our date, Lee?
We'll know May 20th.
May 20th. So it'll be before we adopt the budget and we can make the adjustments.
Just wanted to zoom in one more time, and we're talking about funding sources right now. Those two items in green, if we add those two together, the 1.54 and the 1.1 for the bond premium, again, this is how we're gonna fund those handful of critical projects that we've identified for 26. Those two together equals 2.6 million. And here's the list of those critical projects. We'll talk about them in detail in just a moment, but wanted to kind of give you an idea in the scope of the funding sources that you see in the CIP currently. These are the projects that we really thought were critical in 26 communities.
So Kim, you're probably gonna answer this question someplace. I see that we have it for the county, we have it for Forsyth Tech, but where are the priorities for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools?
The specific priorities are not listed in the CIP
I know,
this year.
have they set those
So,
priorities yet?
right, so what we have is what they plan to do with the existing funds, the 2/3 bonds that they already have. What we don't have from them that they're still working on is any funds that they would need outside of the traditional funding. They've not provided that to us. We're still waiting on that. And we plan to, just like we're gonna be working on our own CIP, next fiscal year, we're gonna work closely with the schools, we're gonna work closely with Forsyth Tech. We all have capital needs, and so we'll bring that back to you all at that time.
Right, I just want us to get back to the basics in terms of their needs.
Sure.
And our responsibilities.
Agreed, and I think that's part of the work of this new approach for us, a new approach for them as well, to really have a project-driven capital improvement program.
Thank you.
So we've focused on the funding sources, and now we're gonna look at the uses or the specific capital projects. Again, you notice the same amounts here. This gives you a look of our capital projects in the CIP by element, so county buildings, emergency services, parks, and the sheriff's office. This is a look at the capital improvement program by project type, equipment, major building renovations. You've heard some mechanical and electrical and plumbing needs from me in the past. And then we're gonna get into that list of those 26 critical projects for the county. First, we're gonna start with the turnout for emergency services. This is made to be waterproof. They use it on all their vehicle collision calls, rescues on that construction sites. It's resistant to bloodborne pathogens, which is a necessary piece of equipment for emergency services, and this gear did expire in 2018. It typically has a lifespan of about 10 years. So this came up during our budget deliberations for the general fund budget. We felt like this was a critical need to bring to you for this fiscal year. Under the major renovations category, there are two projects listed here for the jail. The law enforcement detention center, there's a life safety systems project that is related to the fire alarm system and the fact that it's, I believe, original to the building. But the components for this system are no longer being manufactured, and that's a concern that if this system is not functioning, we could not be in compliance with fire code and life safety code, building code, and some other regulations. So this has risen to the top as a necessary project, as well as a switchgear at the jail. This is a needed maintenance safety switch, which somehow will allow for more efficient and safer cleaning and and maintenance issues to the system at the jail, and hopefully, by adding that can mitigate some potential power outages, and certainly we need to make sure that the power is functioning at the jail. Certainly have prioritized some of these mechanical, electrical, and plumbing items. In fact, in some of the bigger projects that you saw back in April, we've gone down to prioritize specific components that have to be done now, and then tried our best to prioritize those items. And so certainly, I think the term used by General Services was they're nervous about this project and would really hope that this can be done sooner rather than later. The pump package has failed at the jail, and they've done a great job of cobbling together a fix for now. But if this does fail, this is a potential shutdown for the facility. So this is a high priority issue for them to fix. As well as the HVAC, the animal shelter, and DSS. That DSS facility is 40 years old. The compressor has already been rebuilt. One time, it's just reached the end of its useful life. And I know there's been some issues with the animal shelter for the last year and a half with that system. I think nervous is a good word for them as well with that system, and certainly we want to be in compliance with care of the animal shelter. And then one other project I wanted to bring to you. This is an item that is using 23 PAYGO, existing funding source from 23 PAYGO. It was approved in 24 as an LEDC or a jail security camera project. Now, unfortunately, in the exploration of this project, we've identified that there's some infrastructure needs that have to happen before the cameras can be replaced at the jail, which does increase the total cost of the project. So what we'd like to do is use that approved 23 PAYGO funding to use for the infrastructure piece this year, and then bring back to you the cost for the cameras in a CIP next year. And again, these cameras really are improved safety for staff, help monitor inmate behavior, and could provide evidence for investigations if there is any incident at the jail. We spoke about county capital horizon issues, not Horizon Park. And this is a list of all the projects that you have seen to date. We really want to make sure that county staff know, that you all know that those projects have been identified. We know that they're continue development for the projects and for a sustainable funding strategy. As we move through 26, we will still work to do that. Again, these projects are not included in the capital improvement plan, nor the funding source recommended. So a whole list for those, a lot of those projects and deferred maintenance projects. So next steps for capital is, I mentioned that we're going to have an agenda item come to you next week with the CFO to help with some of that consolidation item that will also identify some funding for the CIP as you see it today.
I'm sorry, that should say in May.
I'm sorry, should say in May, yeah, next week. May 20th, yep. And then June 5th, with the possible adoption of the capital budget ordinance along with the general fund budget ordinance, will be that date if this board chooses. So are there any questions for me about capital at this time?
I think the choice for the things for next year that you've highlighted, I think those are all good. I mean, I guess those are good top priority items. You mentioned this kind of lays out the details, and we have seen that before. I think that's a good list, and you've identified sources to pay for it, which is very important.
You told me we'd be done by 11:35 earlier today. I don't want to say you're crazy, but here we are. Just as a reminder of what our next steps are, there is a public hearing on Monday at 6 p.m. up in the board meeting room. And then we've got workshops scheduled next Thursday, and then the following Thursday, and then the following Monday, I believe, at 9 o'clock a.m. I believe those will be down here on the 4th floor as well.
And just so you know, the 29th and 2nd is if you need them. So if you don't need them, that's fine, but if you need them, we set dates for those.
We've got June 5th as our target for adopting the FY26 budget at 2 o'clock p.m. If we are unable to adopt on June 5th, just we'll schedule additional workshops, and then just as a reminder, we do have to have a budget or a continuing resolution adopted prior to July 1.
I'll
Yes, ma'am.
point out that we would have been finished at 11:15 had it not been for the sheriff.
I know, we derailed it.
Hey, we're on me. I don't even share equally.
I asked
That's
one
good one,
question,
Lane.
one lousy question. Kick it all off.
I know, right? Thank you all so much for being here today and for the questions and the feedback that we've received. If you have anything that you want specifically discussed next Thursday, please let us know. Chantel knows we have to address that. We definitely have some things that we know we'll follow up on. But other than that, Chantel.
Well, I think I can speak for all the commissioners that we appreciate all the preparation, and I will say the advanced workshops that we did back before this were helpful, and there's still some more to digest. Perhaps some of the presentation, I couldn't listen to it quite as fast. I had not digested all the end of the thing. I didn't get through all sides before we got through, but it's been very helpful. Appreciate all the hard work. There's been still lots of details, and it's a lot to say grace over, but I appreciate all that work, and we got a little time to digest, and we'll be back here next Thursday at 9 o'clock to continue, and maybe we'll have a little more, we can get down to some of the weeds of some things and spend a little more time talking about some things, which will be good. That's helpful. So thank all of you. And yes, other comments.
I don't need a lot of discussion, but just to forecast, there was one revenue side question. I know that I believe the state was projecting a 4% increase in sales tax revenue, and the recommended budget, as I understand it, is based on a 3%. So there may be discussion about the 3 versus 4 question, and sort of an analysis of your thinking and recommending the 3, whether you were taking into effect sort of national churn on, say, the uncertainty regarding tariffs, or the economic growth rate, if any of that played in. But just
Do you want us to answer that now, or you want next week?
next week is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Is there anything else you want to make sure that we prepare for next week? Besides, we have a handful of follow-up items.
Well, I think we can probably send you, I'm going to send you probably an email that identifies some of those instead of talking to you right now.
And do you want to meet in this room next week or upstairs?
I don't know what the pleasure is, but I find this an easier room to meet in than sitting around the dais. I assume it looks like, I mean, if the quality is good for the broadcast and the streaming piece and whatever, we can hear. I don't know that other people can hear as well. That may be the issue for others that are here, but for me, I'll just speak for myself. I'd rather be here.
Yeah, the technology works, so we're good.
That's a new screen.
Well, they changed the 4, because the 4 screens you just cut off, so they just changed the 4 to 1.
Yeah, better. Yeah, good.
It's easier to see the presentation here instead of peering down at my desk and then up.
Good.
Okay. That's
So,
all.
nothing else. We're adjourned for today.
Wow.